All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're looking at a really sharp European critique of the 2025 U.S. national security strategy. And look, this isn't just some minor squabble over policy details. The source material we're breaking down sees it as a major challenge to America's place in the world, and it really shines a light on a deep fracture in the whole transatlantic relationship. And get this for an opening line. The analysis kicks off with this absolute bombshell of a statement. It's not calling the strategy flawed or misguided, it's calling it a capitulation, a surrender. Right from the get-go, this sets an incredibly confrontational tone, basically signaling a total rejection of where American foreign policy is headed. So, what do they actually mean by capitulation? Well, we're not talking about a simple policy disagreement here. The critique argues that the strategy's entire philosophy is a surrender to the most cynical version of world politics. A world where it's basically just might makes right. And here's a crucial point. The critique argues this strategy isn't even new. Not really. Instead, it claims America is just doubling down on its own worst habits, relying too much on military force, being selective about human rights, and making deals with authoritarian regimes whenever it's convenient. And that brings us to this really key phrase from the critique, transactional nationalism. So what is that? Well, the source defines it as a move away from a system of alliances and international law, which, has its flaws, to a world where every relationship is just a short-term, zero-sum deal. It's all about what one nation can get right now, and that's it. Okay, so with that big picture laid out, the analysis really starts building its case. It zeroes in on several specific and pretty hard-hitting criticisms of the U.S. strategy. The first major charge is a big one, that the U.S. is actively trying to weaken its own allies. The claim is that America is siding with far-right, anti-EU groups, not to encourage allies to pay their fair share, but to actually try and break up the European Union from the inside. Next, the analysis looks at the Middle East. It calls the U.S. pivot away from the region a kind of imperial disregard. The argument is that pulling out and calling the region a constant irritant just creates this massive power vacuum. And guess who's left to deal with the fallout, from security threats to refugee crises? Europe. The third big criticism really focuses on what the source sees as a massive double standard. It points out how the U.S. strategy talks up national sovereignty for its allies, often to protect them from accountability, while at the same time, it's reviving a Monroe Doctrine-style attitude to dominate its own backyard in the Western Hemisphere. The critique says this isn't about principles, it's just about power. And this table, wow, it really just lays the whole divide bare. Just look at that right-hand column. Where the U.S. strategy sees tough love for allies, the critique calls it strategic sabotage. Where the strategy talks about a strategic reallocation away from the Middle East, the critique calls it a moral and strategic abdication. In every single area, the counter-argument paints the U.S. vision as a destructive backward step. So as you can probably tell by now, this is about way more than just policy choices. According to this source, what we're really seeing is a fundamental clash between two completely different worldviews. It's a fight over what international cooperation is even for. This slide right here gets to the absolute heart of it. The U.S. strategy, as this critique reads it, sees international rules and alliances as a burden, as constraints that hold America back. But the European perspective laid out here sees those exact same things as essential. They're the tools you need to manage global power, including America's own, to stop the world from becoming a total free-for-all. So, faced with this new American direction, what's the proposed path for Europe? Well, the answer isn't to just copy this new nationalism. It's to do something completely different, to chart a course based on its own set of values. The source calls for Europe to build what it calls genuine strategic autonomy. And this isn't about building power through just military might. It's about building influence through principles, like democratic socialism, a serious focus on climate justice, and humane migration policies. It's a vision for a totally different kind of global power. So where does all this lead? If the U.S. keeps going down this road, what does this analysis see as the final outcome? The conclusion is a pretty stark warning about the future of, well, the entire global order. Yeah, the final judgment here is that this strategy isn't just a policy change, it's a regression. It's seen as actively tearing down the international system, flawed as it is, and pushing the world back toward an era of just unrestrained realism. A world, the source warns, that's going to be a lot more dangerous, a lot more lawless, and totally unprepared to deal with global crises. And all of this leaves us with this one final, central question. It's really the tension at the heart of this whole debate. As power shifts around the globe, are international rules a cage that holds nations back? Or are they the only thing that actually protects everyone's sovereignty in the first place? This critique has made its answer pretty clear, leaving the rest of us to grapple with the consequences.